All right, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our structured conversation. You are tuning into the structured conversation entitled Assessment Camps, Building Confidence and Competence among staff with Dr. Darby Roberts and Dr. Martha Glass. Thank you all for joining us. My name is Whitney Brown and I will serve as your moderator for today. And on behalf of SAL and the Professional Development Committee, I'd like to thank you all for participating in today's structured conversation and send an extra thanks to our guest speakers, Dr. Roberts and Dr. Glass. Before we get started, I'd like to just run through a few logistics for those of you that are new to structured conversations. I'd like to note that you can feel free to adjust the size of your chat box here on the left hand screen to more closely monitor our conversation. You should see a chat box on the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. I encourage you to participate in today's conversation by asking questions, sharing comments, or providing feedback by chatting through and using the various tools offered in the menu above that chat window. You can insert emoticons into the chat window. I'm showing some emotion. You'll see I am smiling right now. You should see that pop up next to my name, or add any other emotions you'd like to share with the group. Give some applause as well. You can also indicate that you've stepped away using the step away button as well. We will be primarily using the chat room for questions and comments, but if you do have a microphone and you wish to ask a question or offer a comment, you can raise your hand here. You should see my hand raised now, and I can unmute your mic and we can give your voice an opening. Finally, we'll be having a poll today in the session. You'll see that there's a little icon with an A in it. That's where we'll be indicating our votes. So when the time comes to vote, you'll be able to click that button and make a drop down to select your answer there. So we look forward to engaging you through the poll too. All right, so I think that's all of our logistics. If you have any questions through the session logistic-wise, feel free to make a comment in the chat and we can help you out. So at that, I'd like to dive in with today's structured conversation and give a brief introduction to our presenters before we get started. So today we have with us, again, two presenters. We have Dr. Darby Roberts. She is the Director of Student Life Studies at Texas A&M University. Darby also teaches in the Student Affairs Administration and Higher Education Master's Program. Her course, Assessment and Interventions in Student Affairs, prepares students to assess departments, programs, and student learning in the co-curricular. Her professional involvement includes being past co-chair for NASPA's Assessment, Evaluation, and Research Knowledge Community, co-editing Learning is Not a Sprint, and co-authoring Student Affairs Assessment Theory to Practice and contributing chapters to several other books. So thank you for joining us, Darby. We also have with us Dr. Martha Glass, and she is the Senior Director of Assessment and Professional Development in the Division of Student Affairs at Virginia Tech, where she coordinates assessment for 24 departments. She also oversees assessment educational efforts, coordinates program reviews, and assists with strategic planning and accreditation activities, as well as provides leadership for professional development offerings in the division. Martha is also an assistant professor in the Higher Education and Student Affairs program at Virginia Tech. And Martha serves on the Directorate of the ACPA Commission on Assessment and Evaluation and is the chair for the 2017 ACPA Assessment Institute. We're so fortunate to have such fabulous presenters today. And with that, please welcome me in joining Dr. Darby Roberts and Dr. Martha Glass with a conversation about assessment camps, building confidence and competence among staff. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Whitney, and thanks everyone for being here today. We are glad to be here. We're excited to talk about assessment and professional development, and we're just going to jump right on in. And what we're going to talk about today, what we really want you to take away from this is ideas to keep us moving forward in training and developing future assessment leaders, staff on your campus, and build that competence as well as that confidence among your staff in order to be able to do assessment and do it well. And really thinking about what are some creative ways, different ways that you can do that professional development, that training with your staff to really enhance your whole division. And so as we go through today, we're going to give you some ideas that hopefully you can take some nuggets back to your campus and adapt some ideas from what Martha and I are going to talk about today. And it was kind of funny because we came about this without even knowing and have some similarities and some differences. So you'll get to see that. All right. And so here we are with the polling question. And so which of these best describes the assessment, training, or professional development in your division? Could be nothing happens, few brief random sessions, fairly consistent series of trainings, or well-developed sessions and more intense workshops. And you can use that icon with the letter A in it and make your selection.
Okay, so just a couple more seconds here and I'll publish the results on the screen.
All right, so it looks like a fair number of people have some brief sessions here and there, but maybe not as consistent as they might like. And then we've got a few people who have nothing, and then a few people who have some fairly consistent series of trainings. And then I know some people were putting their responses in the chat room as well. Okay. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about our assessment boot camp at Texas A&M, and then Martha will tell you about their camp at Virginia Tech. And we wanted to make something fun, something that would get people excited or enthused about this, and so we took it from a workout theme. So assessment boot camp gets your assessment in shape, and you can see our logo has that shoe print and some assessment-related graphics in there. And really this was about creating that identity, creating a theme that we were going to use throughout. So really briefly about the Division of Student Affairs at A&M and the institution. So we're a large institution. We're in College Station, Texas, which is about an hour and a half from Houston, an hour and a half from Austin, a few hours from Dallas, and a few hours from San Antonio. Large student population and lots of degree programs. We also have a military and civilian student lifestyle similar to Virginia Tech. And in our division right now, we've got 17 departments, over 500 full-time employees, and about 1,500 student employees that help us run everything in our division. Pretty complex organization, lots of staff, lots of variety in what we do. So a little bit then about student life studies. So we're really fortunate here to have a department that focuses on assessment, focuses on continuous improvement, and what we do is serve the 17 departments in the division, as well as over 1,000 student organizations can come directly to us for their assessment needs. We've been around since 1998, so we're one of the oldest departments of student affairs assessment in the country. And we do about 300 client-related projects per year. And we have this partnership model where our client is the content expert and we're the process expert in a way. And so we do our best to help staff and students understand how to improve and gather that information that's going to help them do that. We also oversee our division assessment team, so that's a representative from every department in the division, plus our alumni association. And really we talk about what are the needs of our division, how can we move us forward in the assessment world, how are we sharing results, The team gets additional training in terms of assessment methods, concepts going on campus, as well as working with their assessment plans for each department. And one of the other things that Student Life Studies does is coordinates our division comprehensive program review process. So every department in the division that doesn't already get accredited goes through about every 7 years going through a program review. And we spend a lot of our effort on student learning and assessing student learning in the co-curricular. And we spend a lot of time training our staff, providing workshops that give introduction to particular topics. But we also realized we have a lot of doing assessment, and we weren't quite sure that there was true understanding and valuing of assessment. And so that's one of the reasons we decided that we were going to jump in and do an intense training to get all of our staff, ensure, not all of our staff, but staff who were coming on the same page, make sure that we were working from the same terminology, looking at a variety of methods, just to once again get people comfortable with the thought of not only doing assessment, but really engaging in assessment and understanding the value of what they're doing and be able to use that. And Maureen, yeah, okay, Whitney responded to that. So we decided we're going to jump in and we're going to do a boot camp. And as I said, it really was from that get in shape, workout concept. We started about 9 months ahead in the planning of it. Everything from how are we going to do this, what's our theme, what are the outcomes going to be, why are we doing it, and figuring out what we wanted staff to know at the end of the day. And once we got that rolling, we decided that we were going to have a nomination process as well as open registration. And so we asked the 17 directors to nominate staff to attend because we wanted this to be seen as something that was worthy, something that was important and important to their director. And so directors could nominate staff that they thought needed that extra assistance or as a reward for doing good assessment, but we let them first nominate staff, and then we opened registration to our whole division. So anyone from grad students who were here in the summer to full-time staff to directors, whoever wanted to attend could attend. And then we had a few seats open. We were capping it at 50 people, and so we also invited several people from outside of our division that really perform student services functions. They just aren't in the Division of Student Affairs. And so specifically invited a few people from outside of the division to come. We sent reminders. We talked about it in meetings. Our vice president sent out an email to the whole division expressing his gratitude and saying how important it was. And so really it was seen as something that's a high-quality professional development opportunity in our division. And one of the best things is that it's free. And so we were able to do this with some of our reserve funds to put this on and be able to not charge staff to come to this. And keeping with that theme, you'll see we have water bottles on the table. You can also see that we had stress balls, but in the shape of a weight. And so we really tried to keep with the theme of that. And then all participants also got a free copy of the Student Affairs Assessment Theory to Practice book. We were able to do that. And really, once again, just sticking with that theme and making it fun and motivating to the point where we actually told staff to come dressed in their workout gear and come as casual and comfortable, that we would be moving, we would be sticking with this theme. And so we were able to incorporate that, and most people took us pretty seriously to have that fun, including we brought in Gavin Hemming, my co-author for the book, and he's a faculty member at New England College. We got him to dress down and be part of that as well. And in terms of the schedule, which I'll get to in a little bit, we based it really on our assessment cycle and how we implement it, so people could start at the very beginning and then understand the entire process that they were going to go through. And I will talk a little bit. So the outcomes that we developed, we created 3 basically that were the ones that we were going to assess on. And so by the end of the day, we really wanted people to be able to write an effective learning outcome, which we thought that a lot of people did, but every now and then we still get people who don't understand the concept, and so we wanted to make it something that we're all going to learn together, be able to do together, and by the end of the day it's going to make sense. And then choose appropriate assessment methods to measure learning and program outcomes. We sometimes, less so now, but have staff come to us and say, I need to do a survey. And we always say, okay, let's back up for a minute. Maybe surveying is not the way to go, but that was what they knew. So they didn't necessarily know about a lot of other methods where it would be easier or more appropriate to implement. And then creating a plan to make improvements using results. So as I said toward the beginning, we had a lot of doing assessment, but we didn't always know that staff were making improvements based on the assessment that they had done. And so we wanted to be sure that we were hitting that pretty hard, that they understood how to take results and then do something with it for improvement. And these were just the outcomes that we were going to assess, but we really, at the end of the day, wanted everyone to be on the same page. We wanted them to know other people in the division who were working on assessment and make it easier both on them and on student life studies as we help them through their individual projects. So the schedule, in once again keeping with that athletic theme, morning kickoff, so we had breakfast, and then our vice president came and welcomed everyone to this, once again showing that assessment's really important to the division. And he hadn't been here very long, but had already come in and were asking questions about what programs were being assessed, how the information was being used, and so once again this was his opportunity to stress his priority in terms of assessment. And then our warm-up exercise was our morning keynote by Gavin, and he really set the stage for why assessment is important, the big picture of where this fits into higher education, what in student affairs we talk about in terms of competencies, and really setting the stage as to why this is important and how we're going to move forward and how this is about improvement. It's not just assessment for assessment's sake. And once we warmed up, then we jumped right into innovative fitness, and that is where we covered basic terminology, the assessment cycle, and laid that foundation of assessment in the Division of Student Affairs. And then we talked about outcomes and outcome development, writing outcomes, and got them engaged in that process. And then mid-morning stretch, we actually had, fortunately, folks from our rec sports department attending the session, and so one of the attendees also led us literally in stretching. And so we got up, we stretched, we moved around, took a break, and got that kind of engagement in that. You don't often think to do that when you release people for a break. You just kind of set them free. But we also wanted them to be able to physically stretch as well as stretch their mind. And we actually got a lot of positive feedback about that. And then when they came back from that morning stretch, we really dove into this in that cardiovascular training where we talked about assessment types, assessment methods, selecting the right method for what you're trying to do, how you implement that, and how you manage the whole process. The great thing about student life studies in our client-based model is we have the technology, we have the ability to do web-based surveys, paper-based surveys, help them with focus groups, and so this really was helping them understand there are multiple opportunities and options for them to choose the method that's right for them, and for them to start understanding that there are options, it's appropriate or important to use the appropriate method, and then how they manage that process with us or without us. And then also as part of that session talked a little bit about data analysis. One of the things we know about our staff is most of them are not statistics junkies, and so they sometimes struggle with being overwhelmed by thinking this is going to be a really difficult statistical process. And so we kind of gave them a little bit of statistics background, but not enough to overwhelm them, just to help them become comfortable with the concept and help them see examples and understand SPSS output and what that might mean. So then we got to refueling, had a great lunch, and Gavin once again presented a keynote address really about developing a culture, but really a culture that relates to change and how assessment fits into the change process and becoming a learning organization, and thinking about it more globally as part of their department. Once again, why we're doing assessment, and then really what does it mean as you use that in creating change in your organization. Then we got to some resistance training and talked about how you use results and giving them an opportunity to practice that and think about that, as well as how you share results. We have talked to some of our staff anecdotally, and they do assessment, they get the report from Student Life Studies, and they don't necessarily think about the variety of ways that they can share that with students, with staff, with the Vice President's office, in multiple ways. And so we wanted to spend some time helping them understand there are multiple ways that you can share. It doesn't have to be difficult, but it's an opportunity, once again, to engage with your stakeholders. Then we had a mid-afternoon stretch, once again, got up, physically stretched, took a break, and then came back to our CrossFit classes. And this is where we let people choose their own adventure, so to speak. We presented 4 topics, and participants could go to 2 of the 4. And they were quick 20-minute sessions. And so one was on retention, persistence, and graduation, and how that might be relevant for them in some of the programs that they do, and how Student Life Studies can help them calculate some of those things. Then we had a session on improving response rates, and a lot of our staff struggle with that, might get disappointed at response rates, and we talked about some creative ideas in terms of getting students or staff to respond to surveys. We had a brief session on conducting qualitative assessment, so really highlights of how you might set it up, doing a focus group, things to consider when you're planning that, and then really quick pieces about how you might analyze it. So once again, you could have a whole semester on or more on qualitative methodology and data collection and analysis. We just gave them a little bit of a sample. And then the 4th one was on managing assessment ethics and politics. So we talked about the institutional review board. We talked about what you do when you might have not so positive results, and how you share that, and who has decision making, and those kinds of things. So once again, those 4 options, participants could go to 2. Then we fit that in that period of time. And then as we got toward the end of the day, the yoga one-on-one, 101 and meditation, is Gavin brought us back and really encapsulated the whole day, and really gave us a charge to move forward in terms of the assessment that we do, making it meaningful and manageable, and something that we can incorporate in our daily lives without getting stressed about it. And then the last part was the cool down. We reviewed the day, reviewed the concepts, provided resources, and reviewed the resources that they had in their packet that they got. the opportunity for them to ask questions, and then the evaluation that we did as part of the process. So that's a long day, and we realized it could not be us just standing and talking to them for 8 hours a day. I wouldn't like that, so they don't like that either, and we said we need to incorporate a lot of different ways in terms of instructional design of how to engage them in the process. So not only did we have presentation pieces, but with a lot of the presentations and the content, we gave them the opportunity to apply that either working individually or working as a group or in pairs. And so throughout the day, we incorporated those things. So in the morning, one of the first things we did was ask them what they wanted to learn for that day. And a little bit later on, as we talked about writing learning outcomes, we asked them to then translate that into a really nice learning outcome. And then I'll show you the assessment planning worksheet in a little bit, but they then had something they could fill out on their own. They shared some pieces with colleagues, but something that they could take away that is helpful for them in an assessment project that they were actually thinking about doing. Then we had some group work where they're sharing their assessment plan with a colleague and paired people up in either as pairs or in small groups to talk about what they were doing and get feedback on that. We had them create communication plans after identifying stakeholders as part of that process. We did give them case studies. We also had, toward the beginning, a little competition, and we had an online game, and they broke into teams, and part of it was learning the vocabulary and the language, and so the online game called Kahoot, and you can make your own questions, and so we did that to get them, once again, engaged in the process, get them excited, get them motivated, get them active in that. And you can see in the pictures I've shown how they've been working together, but nicely that they're in comfortable clothing, if they wanted to sit on the floor and work, but it really was helping them work out with their colleagues, learning about assessment, being able to get feedback, to be able to contribute as a part of that in this kind of fun, safe environment that we provided for them. So you can see our assessment bootcamp planning worksheet, and so they had the opportunity to fill this out throughout the day, but it helped them really conceptualize a project that they wanted to do, why they were doing it, who they wanted to do it with, simple steps in writing learning outcomes, ideas in terms of data collection. You see some Bloom's taxonomy in there, and we talked about that. And then how they're identifying their methodology and explaining why, and whether that's a direct or indirect method. And so those things fit throughout the day, that they kept coming back to this worksheet to fill it out. That's the front page of it. And then Student Life Studies also has this as a worksheet as well, separate from Bootcamp. That's a little bit different. And then on the back, some action planning. So what are they going to be doing, who's going to do it, what the deadlines are, who their stakeholders are, their plan for sharing results. The one in the top right that says 2 recommendations for the Aggie Leadership Conference, we actually gave them a made-up report that Student Life Studies wrote, and for them to be able to read that report and using their expertise to say, here are recommendations that this conference could use to improve. So giving them that practice of thinking about what those options are and what that might be based on data that they've been given. And so we collected their worksheet, and we actually graded the worksheet before we gave it back to them, but it was helpful for them to have that throughout the day to practice with. And Campus Labs has something similar to this as well that we've adapted to Student Life Studies. And so, of course, the assessment people created assessment as part of this project and this program. And so one of the things that we incorporated before the boot camp is they took the NASPA Assessment Evaluation and Research Competencies rubric, And so we got a sense of where they thought they were in terms of areas of assessment, and that helped us kind of toward the end to figure out, are there things that we need to focus on? Are we making assumptions about their level of expertise, and do we need to change some of the things we're doing? And then afterwards, we also did that as a post-test, and so we got a sense of where their improvement was. Then we did some 1-minute reflections, and so there are 2 questions there. One about their learning and how they will apply that in their work, and then from an evaluation of the program is what suggestions that did they have. And so you can see in the picture, that group created a Wordle or a word cloud based on some of the things that they were working on. And then we collected and scored their worksheets. One of the things I'll also mention is, because we wanted to take pictures, is we actually got photo releases from everyone who came so that we could take their picture and post it on our website, use it for future advertising, things like that. So if you do take people's pictures, be sure you get a photo release form as your institution suggests those. So this is what Student Life Studies used to score their assessment planning worksheet, and so you can see we went through pieces of it, scored it, gave feedback to them, and that helped us understand, did we meet our outcomes? Did we hit the mark? Did we miss the mark? Are there things that our staff still don't understand that we need to go back and prepare for? And so in terms of wrapping this up, we are planning to do it again this year. This will be our 2nd time. The first year we had 50 people attend, and this year we're going to cap it at 40 to make it a little bit more manageable. And then after that, we're going to reevaluate our timing and our content and potentially move toward a beginner model and maybe an intermediate model, or we might think about different topics that we'd be presenting as well, or do it every other year. And so at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Martha to talk about Virginia Tech and how they have incorporated a camp on their campus.
Great. Thank you so much, Darby. Thanks, everybody. It's nice to spend time with you today. I think you'll see a lot of similarities between the camp program that we're doing at Virginia Tech and what Darby just went over. And we want to make sure we leave some time at the end for questions. So our camp, we call it Summer Assessment Camp, and we want to develop assessment leaders. We want them to gain competency in assessment and also gain confidence in how they're doing assessment. So just to tell you a little bit about Division of Student Affairs at Virginia Tech, large public land-grant university. We have close to 30,000 students here on our Blacksburg campus, which is located in Southwest Virginia. 9 colleges, grad school. You can see all of our other stats there. And in the Division of Student Affairs, we have 24 departments. We have about 2,600 employees, and I know that may seem like a lot for a campus of our size. We do have our own dining staff and all of our own custodial staff, and so that accounts for quite a few of those employees. And then we have about 1,000 student employees. So I thought I'd take you back a little bit to kind of explain where we were when I came into this role to oversee assessment in the Division of Student Affairs, in case some of you are kind of in the same place, that might give you an idea for where to get started. So back in 2010, that's when I was hired full-time in the division, we had just wrapped up our accreditation process. And before I came on board, there had been someone part-time in the division that had started to get some assessment work going. We had an assessment roundtable that met monthly with a rep from each department, but departments were really kind of on their own, doing their own thing. We really made a turn for things also in 2010 because we developed and approved what we call our aspirations for student learning. And that really has led to the creation of our student life curriculum. So for some time now, we've had division-wide learning goals. And so one of the first things I was charged with was helping departments align their own mission goals and outcomes with those division-wide learning goals, and then of course to start to gather evidence that they were offering opportunities for the students to learn the aspirations and to put them into practice. And so some of these things may look pretty familiar to you. Some of the early things I heard were, I already have too much to do, it's just an add-on, I don't know anything about statistics, we've done this before. You know, some of my colleagues that have been here for a while said, oh, assessment came up a number of years ago and then it kind of passed. And then they also wanted to know, isn't this your job? But at the time, I was an office of one. So an office of one person serving more than 20 departments that needed to be engaged in assessment. And so I really had to think, how am I going to manage this? And began to view myself as a consultant and followed a similar model that Darby said, as far as a partnership model, and talking with my colleagues about they are the expert in their functional area. I know about assessment, and so together hopefully we can make some progress around that. So some things that you might want to think about, we're presenting these assessment camps, you know, a day or day and a half long program, and that might not be the best fit for you. So I just was trying to think of some questions that you might ask yourself as you think about what might work for you, because I know I was inspired by a program I saw at another university, but they did a semester-long series. And I thought, I don't think I'm going to get my colleagues to commit to kind of a class model. You know, the things that work well on our campus are folks can get away if they block like an entire day. It's hard for them to give up an hour or two here or there, because that time will get, you know, squished out and they'll fill it with something else, or a student comes in or something like that. So think about what type of training is going to work best for your colleagues. What does assessment look like for you? So even our terminology, I might have had folks coming from other campuses, and their terminology may have been a little different than the way we talked about assessment at Virginia Tech. So you need to figure out what your terminology is, what your culture is, what the expectations are, because all that's going to help inform how you might want to set up these types of learning experiences. And then what are the most important lessons that we need to cover? So I really was trying to make my colleagues feel confident and that they could do assessment work on their own and come to me when they needed some consultation or that kind of thing, but I wasn't going to be able to manage all of their projects on my own. So some of the first things that we did was identify some assessment friends. So hopefully some of you that are on here would consider yourself in that group, or you know some people that are kind of early adopters to assessment. So first I went to our assessment roundtable because we did have a rep from each department, and I knew pretty early on who was really bought in and who wanted to really work on this. And then I asked those people, did they want to be camp counselors? So we pretty much kept this model, camp counselors, and I try to rotate some people in from roundtable each year or every 2 years to change it out to give people a chance. They kind of see it as a leadership role, I believe, at this point. So that's a good thing. There's usually about 5 of us that serve as these camp counselors, and we are the planning team, and we're there to do small group work with people. And then, of course, think about what are your theoretical foundations, and there's been a number of great books that have come out in the last couple of years, including the one that Darby edited, so I would add quite a few more things, but those were some of the things we were looking at early on. We wanted to use our assessment camp as a model for good practice. So this is just something that's really easy to do, but it can be a missed opportunity. So every time we got to a different topic in our camp session, we had outcomes. You know, we had mission and goals for the entire camp. During the registration, we asked people about their attitudes about assessment. And I like Darby's idea about using the rubrics. Anything that you can kind of do to get people ready for what they're going to be learning when they come into the camp session. During the program, we used clickers, and we did formative assessment. So we could talk about formative assessment, do a pre-test or post-test on it, and then explain to people, hey, this is exactly what we just did. We wanted to give them a chance to also practice with assessment tools. So if they were going to be using an iPod for data collection, we wanted why not take the time during the lunch hour to have them respond to a question on the iPad so that they could see how easily they could do it. So sharing our mission, really what we wanted to do is provide an introduction. We wanted to create a common language because everybody was kind of saying different things. We wanted a chance for people to network, including, you know, folks that maybe were thinking they were interested in assessment. They would come in contact with somebody who was also enthused about assessment, and some of that would rub off. And that seemed to work well. Of course, we wanted to just build everybody's basic knowledge around assessment and let them know that we were committed to continuous improvement. Some of our goals, of course, I've mentioned a few of these, that creating capacity, confident leaders, an awareness of university resources, and start to build a community of leaders around assessment, because we know this would foster a culture of assessment throughout the division. So some of our specific camp outcomes, of course, understanding the role of assessment in the division, articulate our assessment cycle, become familiar with assessment terms, be able to write goals and write measurable and meaningful outcomes, develop an assessment plan, and understand the basics of design and selecting the correct method. And then finally, to identify resources beyond just mark them. They could usually name me, but I wanted them to know there were some other resources on campus they could go to. So we've been doing this for quite some time, and I thought maybe you'd find it interesting as to how we kind of evolved with this. The first year we did 2 identical sessions. I think camp was 2 days at the time, and we offered one in June and one in July or August, trying to work around our orientation schedule. The next year, we really asked departments to come as a team, and I was really trying to encourage directors to come, because I was hearing from folks, you know, I get it, I came to camp, maybe they're a coordinator or an assistant director, they're like, you know, you really need to make sure my director gets there. So no offense against my director friends out there, but yeah, there's just so much stuff on their plate that we really needed to try to encourage them to come. So that worked for a little bit to bring their team. And then in year 3, we split into 2 camps. So kind of, Darby was saying they might do this here in the future. We have an intro camp, our beginner camp. We offer that in June, and it really has become part of our onboarding process. So I have it the first Thursday and Friday following the date when we hire a lot of new folks. I'm sorry, that's in July after we hire people. They're kind of flipped. The advanced camp actually happens in June. So beginner camp, introductory level, good onboarding experience, and then advanced camp happens earlier in the summer, because that's where I want directors to come and my assessment roundtable reps, because they are going to actually spend that time working on their plan for the year. So it's kind of a good time for them to wrap up the assessment plan that they had just turned into my office, and then to start thinking about the next year. And now we're starting to focus more on having kind of breakout sessions with some of those choose your own adventure things at advanced camp, and really focus on data-driven decision making and department level things. So you can see quick overview here, kind of what we do, very similar, but introduction to assessment, we go through mission goals and outcomes, talk about design and methodology. And there's been times where we haven't even covered surveys, because we knew people know how to do surveys, or at least they think they know how to do surveys, and they want to do them all the time. So we want to try to focus on some of those like classroom assessment techniques, like the 1-minute paper, those kind of things that people could use on smaller programs. We have lunch. Another thing that really helped was our divisional spotlight. So at different times I've brought in folks who maybe were at camp the year before and had a really successful program level or department level assessment project, and they'll come back and present on it. So that way they're not also only just hearing from me or the other camp counselors. And what we really do now at beginner camp is spend the time, as you can see, we're walking through the assessment cycle, and at each place they are stopping and applying that to a case study. So we're talking about how do you write outcomes. Then we give them a case study, and they read that, and they pause, and they write outcomes. And we say, okay, what method might you use to collect data about that? They go back to that case study and apply it. And then the next day, they really get time to focus on something that they are doing in their own department that's, you know, one singular kind of assessment project, and they walk through that and they share that plan out to everyone. We try to make it fun too. Like Darby said, I like the whole workout theme. We have something here at Virginia Tech called Hokie Camp, and it's an orientation type of traditions camp that our students go to. And one of the things they do is they get put in different color groups, and they get bandanas for that color group. So Hokie Camp is so fun. We borrowed those from our friends in orientation, and we put folks in color camps for that. This is a fun activity we did. I took some pictures of signs. We're early on. I said, hey, draw me a picture of what assessment looks like in your department. And I'm not the most creative or artistic person, but I can tell you my colleagues really got into this, and what they drew told me a lot about what was going on. So, for example, my colleague in dining was like, I'm kind of the only one, and I only have one oar, so I'm kind of stuck out here. And then another department, I think that was student conduct at the time, and these were a few years ago, so I'll give them props because they've made a lot of progress. But they said, we have this mountain of data and we don't know what to do with it. So I could, just from them doing this fun activity, learn quite a bit about what was going on. All right, so try to keep advanced camp fun as well. And what we'll do here, because now that I have the attention of department heads, and either they serve as the assessment point person or someone else in the department serves as that point person, we want to, you know, have them get some good quality work done while they're there. And then we also want to talk about some of the larger university things or division-wide things that might be influencing the outcomes that they're creating or the assessment work. So this was from a couple years ago, and my folks had said we really need help developing diversity-related outcomes. So we spent an hour doing that. We went back and revisited our aspirations for student learning frameworks, and I wanted to make it clear to them that this is the work of the division, and even if you're writing a program level outcome, it needs to align with those division-wide learning goals. So it gives me a chance to talk about some other things that aren't just assessment-specific skills in this advanced camp. And again, here's just, this would be an example of the schedule that our campers would get, and we try to make it fun and give my grad assistant named me the International Executive Director last year. She served as the director. We have facilities, camp logistics, those kind of fun things. And while our folks are in their groups working, what we'll do is we'll assign a colleague to go work with that group. So one year, I think Jean Ann, who's my grad assistant, was with the red group, and so she went and worked with those couple offices that fall under the same AVP area and tried to help them get their assessment plans started. So I think that's it. We're going to move through that pretty quickly. So if you have questions, Darby and I can take a minute to offer you some more insight. And I guess if you want to type them in, or if someone does have a microphone and wants to ask anything, we'd be happy to expand on anything that we shared. How many people were, oh, and I didn't even describe my office. I think Darby explained a little bit about her office. If someone wants to know how many people work in your office, when I first started in this role 7 years ago, it was just myself. And then 3 years ago, I got funding for a grad assistant, and then last summer, after professional development was also added to my department, we have another full-time assistant director and a second grad student. So we're still relatively small, and so that's why it was so important for me to empower my colleagues on how to conduct some assessment work on their own. Anything you want to add to that, Darby?
We now have 6 full-time staff members, so we're very fortunate. We just were able to add 1 this last year, focusing on student learning and our assessment and our quality enhancement plan. And then we have 2 grads and 2 student workers. And then we have another question of would we be willing to share the materials sure, you can feel free to email me. Oh, you know, we probably didn't put our emails up there.
I didn't think about it.
My email is darby@tamu.edu.
Yeah, and mine is mglass@bt.edu. I'll type it in here. And yeah, I'm happy to, the documents that we use look pretty similar to what oh, thanks Whitney, what Darby shared, but I'd be happy to share anything or any of our planning documents and such.
Because you have the case studies and the other activities that we did as well.
That's good, yeah. Have the camps helped your division submit their quality assessment plans? That is a resounding yes for us. It gives me a chance to, at assessment camp, it would take me all summer if I went to every department and worked with them on their assessment plan. But in a day and a half, I can get every department at least get started on it and have a good draft. So at the advanced camp, the directors are doing a department level plan. You know, here's all the outcomes that we're going to measure this year. Here's how we're going to do it. Here's who's responsible, all those kind of things. And then the intro camp is more on a smaller, they actually have a smaller program sheet, kind of like Darby shared with the ABCDs and their outcomes and everything. And but yes, I would say it has helped a great deal. And last year was actually the first time I've had every single department turn their plans in on time, and that was a win for me. So.
Yeah, and I think it has helped our staff in terms of when they're planning their individual assessments, their program assessments, is they have a much clearer concept of what they want to do and how they want to do it, and so they're just better prepared when they come meet with us too.
Yeah. One thing I've added is at our first roundtable in September, when everybody's turning their plan in, we do a peer review. So if you have an opportunity to do something like that to follow up, departments, just like you would do in grade school, is, you know, you just switch with the partner next to you and they review it, and that's really helpful, and that's a teachable moment for the person who's also reviewing to see if it's a quality plan. Let's see, I forgot to mention about funding. Our camp is also free. The only cost really is for the meals, and I pay for that out of my office budget. We actually we have one of the top dining programs in the country, so I'll give props to our dining colleagues, and it's usually kind of a treat to go over to our dining center and in our cafeteria style dining center. There's a separate room, and we all get to eat there together. And sometimes we'll do box lunches, but that's really the only cost. There's a question. Both of you mentioned developing the topics of the group prior to camp. Did you all do a needs assessment with division staff prior to camp? Okay. Well, I know Darby talked about using the ACP and NASPA assessment competency rubrics and having folks take that in advance, and I took a note of that because I think that's a terrific idea. We use those for kind of setting the agenda for camp to begin with. So what at a basic level, what do we want our colleagues to know about assessment? And so you'll see that's how we kind of set our outcomes. We also ask people, you know, what are you still kind of struggling with? Or we look back at the plans and they're reporting out things that came in the year before and say, wow, you really got this, but they didn't know how to write the action steps that they were going to take. So we'll make sure that we talk about that during camp. So that's kind of the way that we do it. And then we also I ask my roundtable every spring, hey, we're starting to plan camp. What are some of the topics that you would like us to discuss?
Yeah, and we don't necessarily do needs assessment to plan camp, but we do about every other year do a needs assessment for our division in terms of assessment and what their needs are, what they're struggling with, where they think they're competent, how student life studies can best serve them. And then we also every 3 years do focus groups of our customers, our clients, and get feedback from that. And so both of those really guide how we do some of our training throughout the year, how we work with our assessment team in terms of training. We also get their feedback about what their needs are. And then all of that, too, feeds into what are the things that we think would be appropriate for a camp. Oh, and any positive or unintended consequences. I've had people tell me, now almost a year later, that they still refer back to the resources that they got, or they refer back to the book. And I think we're feeling some positive feedback about that people say that was a great opportunity. I learned some things, and I can tell you how I actually applied that. So I don't know that was unintended, but we think that has helped in really, once again, bringing assessment to the forefront and people looking forward to this camp that we're going to be doing in June.
I would say very similar things. I think it's probably, wow, there's so many things I feel like we've done here to try to create a culture of assessment, but I think this assessment camp, starting it 7 years ago, it has really been one of the foundational things. I ask a question on the registration, are your parents going to drop you off kicking and screaming? Are you going to be homesick? Or are you counting the days until camp begins? And it's still a little bit of a mix. Most people say they're counting the days, and some people worry they're going to be homesick. A few say they're going to be kicking and screaming. But usually after the end of the day and a half or so, they are feeling much more positive about assessment. And so that right there is just a big win, and that has lots of ripple effects. I think just having that more positive attitude about it. And getting better quality plans and reporting out and better quality instruments out there. It lessens my workload, I think, throughout the year to do that on the front end. I think that's their question.
Anything else anyone has to offer, or final words from Whitney as well? I know we're getting close to time.
And then anyone types in their final thoughts or questions, I just wanted to thank our presenters again for an outstanding session. We really appreciate your time and sharing your expertise. I really love hearing about your different camps and how you've been able to customize the learning experiences for your different audiences, and also the themes that you intertwined along with it. So thank you so much. I would like to also let everyone know that a recording of today's session along with the PowerPoint presentation will be shared with you all tomorrow, so watch for that. We also hope to see you at our next structured conversation. It'll be scheduled for June 6th at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. The topic will be on assessing student learning through student employment, and that will be presented by Kelly Cox from Texas A&M University, along with myself. So if we don't have any additional questions, I'd like to again thank Dr. Darby Roberts and Dr. Martha Glass for an amazing presentation and for sharing your time with us today. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Next time.
Thanks, Darby.